Hi, it's Jen from Shabby Fabrics, today with a much requested video from our viewers. We recently released the Fold'n Stitch. It's a wreath. It's amazing. And we did that with Holiday Flourish, a Robert Kaufman Christmas collection. And so many people fell in love with it. The kit sold out very quickly. And many people said, could you please do a video on that? Show us how to make it. And so we contacted Christine Poor, who is the designer for this amazing pattern. Christine's an amazing person, obviously a talented designer, and she has graciously allowed us to share with you the process. I won't be going over specific measurements. I want to make sure we protect her well-written, copyrighted pattern, but we'll be able to talk about the process. So if this is something you're thinking about, you should absolutely do it. So much fun. I made another one yesterday for a kit coming up for 2022. These are going to be coming your way and they're really affordable. Fun to do in just a couple of hours. The one behind me here, another Robert Kaufman collection for Christmas 2021. This is Winter's Grandeur. It works really well with Holiday Flourish. So if you really fell in love with that one and maybe didn't get that one, be sure to grab this kit. What you'll receive will be your pre-cut bosal in our form squares. I love that. One side is fusible, the other side is not. It makes our process so fast. That's why the project can be done in just a couple of hours. And of course, all the other fabrics that you would need. We decided to set off these amazing fabrics that are have metallic accents with a rayon. It's a gold rayon that we have here. And let me see what color that actually is. Not sure if that is this is the larger spool. We have the smaller spool of this available. So that's really, if one spool is more than enough. I think that's color 1819. We'll try to put that in our link of the video. But I want to unpack with you how to make this. Lots of things on the set. Let's just talk about them as we use them. So the first thing I want to point out, which threw me a little bit and it might throw you, and so let's just take care of it, is kind of the anatomy of our wreath. Now this is one partially done, so I wanted to show it to you this way so that we'll be able to finish it together. So we'll be basically making kind of these sandwiches. So on the very, very back of the pattern, Christine gives us the anatomy of our wreath and helps us understand how she's identifying which fabric is which. So the fabric that's actually on the back here, which is our beautiful red, notice how we're seeing that on the front as it comes up, and then these are basically they kind of blossom open like this and they're stitched together. That's why it's not intuitive to think of this as being the back. But when you realize it's really back here, that helps, right? So I wanted to point that out. The fabric here on the front, kind of around this portion, is what we are considering to be our front. Notice it's on this edge and then again in the middle, and it makes this really beautiful kind of secondary star right here in the middle. I love that. It's so pretty. And then the applique is this portion right in here. So you'll want to be sure to identify those on your pattern. Maybe you're going to be using some fabrics at home and be picking up the pattern and maybe the batting kit. That's cool. Whatever's going to work best for your home. And hey, it's not just for the holidays. These are amazing, not only displayed as a wreath, but on the table. I think she's given us some ideas here. You can see Christine she's got some fun. Springtime, summertime, you could really do these for every single month of the year if you wanted to. And she's really added some fun embellishments as well on these points. More of that to come. Go ahead and get your fabrics all cut out. Both the front and the back are just cut out of fabric. Be sure to give that a good press, cut that very precisely. The fabric that's the applique, that's where you'll be using the Heat and Bond Light. One package is more than enough, and you'll want to go ahead and put that, you'll use 2 strips of that, that's 17 inches wide, and you'll iron that down to whatever your applique fabric will be. And you're just going to iron that down, give it a real good press. Of course, use a medium heat for that. And then you'll be cutting out your squares, again, to the sizes that are mentioned in the pattern. Once you have that done, you're really on your way. And the very first step will be, I'll just put this aside for now. We're basically going to be making kind of this, what I would call kind of a sandwich. That's what it's going to look like. And we're going to make another one of those together. And then let's finish our wreath today together. So the first thing we will do is grab whatever is your backing fabric, and if you're going to be purchasing the kit, that's going to be the red. So we'll have that fabric, have your iron really on a pretty hot setting. I have mine all the way up. And our foam, let's look at the foam here. One side is very soft and the other side is kind of scratchy. That's the fusible. Make sure you identify that. Otherwise, if you have that reversed, when you put your iron down to this is going to stick to the bottom of your iron. So what we found, this is the sticky side. This is the fusible, I should say. It's not sticky yet. Is you're just going to center that on top of your backing fabric. We know the glue is really on this side. So what I recommend actually is you just flip it over and iron it from this side. Christine mentions in her pattern maybe putting something down on your workspace to protect that. This is a Fons & Porter applique pressing sheet. When we made our samples, we didn't find any glue oozing at all. But in case you're worried about that, just put your applique pressing sheet down. It could be a piece of muslin, whatever. Something to protect your work surface. And just get in there and give a really good press. You want to have really solid contact. I know in the pattern she mentions even getting wet at that point. I did not do that process yesterday. I was in a bit of a hurry to get the sample done for you today. But give it a really good press and then go ahead and let that cool. While that's cooling, right, I just kind of have that off to the side. I'm working on the next one, and I'm working on the next one, and I'm working on the next one. Because if I touch this fabric right now, it will peel away. It's like anything. It needs to cool down and complete the bond before you start working with that fabric. So I'm just going to actually put that aside for the moment. And now on this piece here, this is going to be our front. And inside the pattern, she talks about making kind of a slit that's an X, and she mentions about 2 inches. Here's what I found out. I think it's a lot simpler to make a bigger cut, and I'm less likely to unseat my stitches. Basically, what you have to keep in mind is this applique is going to sit right on top of that. So you know that you could go bigger than that. You can easily just fold this diagonal to diagonal. I've got a small little ruler here. And I can just set that ruler. Let's see here. If I want to do maybe a 1.5 inch slit, just this way, and then open that up and go the opposite direction. Or you can just snip in with scissors. It doesn't need to be fancy or perfect. But if you really want to have a lot of precision and make it be exactly the same, that's how you can do it. Once you have that done, now you're ready to grab your this piece here, and with right sides together, just like that, we just want to stack them. Now let's go ahead and flip that because we're going to stitch our next step. I remember this yesterday. It did want to shift on me. These are my Clover fine pins. You've probably seen me do most of my patchwork with the extra fine. They're smaller with a smaller gauge. They do such a great job of not unseating the fabric. But I'm going through the foam plus 2 layers of fabric. And so if I use my extra fine, they'll bend at this point. So these are one of my other favorites right now are the Clover fine pins, and this is exactly what they're made to do. Now what we're going to do, I've loaded my machine. I just chose a green. At this point, while I know I'm going to be coming back and doing a decorative stitch with the applique onto my kind of sandwich, so to speak, I don't want to do this sewing with a rayon. It's too slippery and may come unseated. So whatever color that I could be doing a neutral, I just chose a green. I could have chosen a red, whatever, choose a cotton. That's what I'm getting at. I've got a zipper foot in my machine with the needle all the way to the left, because the goal is to sew exactly next to that foam all the way around. I'm also going to shorten my stitch length because I'm going to turn this through, and I want to make sure that there's just tension there. I don't unseat anything. I'm going to sew on a 2.0 on this. It'll also help me hit my corners better, right? Shorter stitch length, I can control kind of where I'm going to stop a little bit better. And I'm also going to have my needle down function engaged. So let's go over to the sewing machine. Our whole job is just to sew all the way around as close to the foam. Don't sew on the foam, just right next to it. So what I'm looking at right now, I have this ability on this machine to move that needle. I'm as far left as I can be. If you don't have a machine that has a zipper foot, maybe you don't know where it is, what you would do is your presser foot part would be here and part will be here. It is absolutely doable, a little more awkward, but you can get the job accomplished. But if you have a zipper foot, obviously that's ideal. So I'm just going to sew as close to that as I can. Okay, so now one of the things Christine recommends is that we trim that. I'm going to go with a 1/4 of an inch. I don't want to go too much closer than that, just because, you know what, I don't want this thing falling apart. So let's just trim that up. And I think it's always good to kind of do a little 45 in the corner there, just to reduce the bulk. And now we're going to turn everything through. And that is where that point turner, if you've been watching our videos for any amount of time, you know it's pretty much on set all the time. So this is where we will turn things right through that opening. I'm going to get my iron heating up. Looks like it is. And we want to have that nice 90-degree corner that I'll never be able to achieve with my fingers. I need to use a tool. I have to admit that back in the day when I was a young quilter and had very little money, I used a shish kebab skewer left over from a barbecue. It was clean, but I poked right through the corner of my project. So you want to make sure if you're not going to be using something like the Clover point turner, just make sure you're not poking all the way through that corner, and now maybe you ruined your project. So I love this tool because it has two purposes. When I need those points like this one, this is the job. And when I need to turn something out smooth, maybe I've done something on a nice arc or curve, I have that. So super great tool. These are made in Japan. Did you know that all Clover notions are made in Japan? I just think that their work ethic and their products are just next level fantastic. Clover products are. Once you have that pressed out all the way, then take that to your pressing mat or ironing board, whatever you have, and let's press everything out just nice and smooth before we go into our next step. And remember how we talked about that applique was going to be coming on next. You know, you're going to see the edges of that applique, and that's why sometimes I am so guilty of leaving a dull blade in my rotary cutter. I'm too lazy sometimes to change it, or I can't find them. Just grab a pack. We have 1 pack, 2 packs, 5, and even now this endurance blade, which I know a lot of people love, just grab that. One of the reasons I recommend that specifically is you want this edge to be as clean as possible. Sometimes people have difficulty getting fusible webbing off the back of their fabric. The simplest way I've found, I know she mentions in there like to score that with a needle. I'm always worried about snagging my fabric. The simplest way to get this off is just to crease it back just like I did. And you see how that released? Let me show you that again. just fold that back quickly and it will release just like that. Then you'll just peel that away. So we will bring our pressing mat, and now we want to be very specific about centering that. By the way, on this shape, remember how we had that on the foam? And if it's not exactly squared, it doesn't matter. This now does matter. The other one you had a little bit of a fudge factor because you could see we trimmed some stuff away. Here, whatever you put down is what you're going to get. So if you want to be really specifically aligned, you know, you can go certainly diagonal to diagonal and then scoot that if you feel necessary, or eyeball it. However you want to do it, do them all the same because you're going to repeat that process for a total of 12. So you just want to be repeating the process. And let's give that a good press. Now you're setting your machine up for a zigzag stitch. So off comes the zipper foot. I've got a 20D on the machine now, and I've loaded it with a beautiful gold rayon that is going to be our beautiful stitch. And I know Christine did a good job of putting in those stitch links inside that pattern. Or, you know, you can do your own thing, maybe a decorative stitch. Hey, you know, if you love decorative stitches, and I think they're so fun, I don't use them nearly enough, go for it. Make it really personable. But this is what we'll be doing here. So we're just going to be starting maybe somewhere along the side, maybe in a corner, wherever you want. But make sure you have a nice clean pivot so that it's just doing a real nice job of framing that. So let's head over to the machine and we will get started with a zigzag stitch. Now where I'm looking on my presser foot is right smack in the middle here. And my needle is going to be hopping back and forth across that. So if I keep my eyes in the middle of this, and I'm kind of mindful of my corner, this should come out looking really nice. So now the next step in our pattern will actually be involving a template that Christine put in the pattern. And I like to make permanent templates. I never want to cut my pattern. I've done that in the past. I'm like, oh, and then it looks doesn't look so great. It's on the last page actually. And this is what's going to be used to help us mark this very specific angle that we need to kind of create these kind of flutes. So my favorite technique when I'm trying to create a kind of a more permanent template, you're going to want to make more of these. I know you will. They're so fun to make. And I mean, really, you could be doing one, like I said, for every single month if you wanted to. The easiest way to make a template, get some of that cut-right freezer paper. I use it every time I want to make a template. And I've got my wafer one light box. And this is where I would just be, I mean, you could almost set this in a corner if you wanted to. And then get a straight edge. Oops, I turned that off. And just get a straight edge, a friction pen or permanent marker, and basically just trace those shapes. And I cut that out with a rotary cutter, so it's really, really precise. And I've done that ahead of time. And you're going to be marking. That's what this looks like. Oops, let me grab that real quick. It's got the shiny side. It doesn't matter. We're not going to iron anything down. You'll have your kind of sandwiches, all 12 of them. Just get them here. By the way, if you're using your own fabric and you have something that's directional, maybe a stripe, you're going to want to set them on your table all in the same exact orientation. Either the stripe all going this way or all going this way, whatever that is, because otherwise they'll be a mix and match and not look quite right when they're sewn together. The template will be placed straight on top of that, kind of just stacked on top, and you'll use a temporary marking pen. I've got a friction pen. You could use chalk. Whatever that is, I recommend not using a permanent marker. Now here's the great news. You're not only going to sew on the line, but it's going to be rolled over and you're really not going to see what's underneath there. So just wanted to mention that. Mark all 12 of those at the same time. And you just kind of start sewing them together. Now that one, that threw me as well. I guess I made a bit of a mess on that. Okay, on her pattern here, I think she writes, she has a diagonal line mentioned, a line across a diagonal. I mean, I think she's just trying to say point to point. You don't need to draw any of this. We know we're going to mark across that line. So that was just kind of a reference point for you. Once you have everything drawn, I was like naturally thinking that somehow that these would line up, these lines. They don't. Position them so that that line is always on the right, just like that. If you do that, you're going to end up sewing them together correctly. So if that's on the right, that's on the right, that's on the right, and that's on the right, you're going to put this together correctly. So we'll just lay these just like that. And I'm going to use my clips. I found that to be the perfect tool for the occasion because of the bulk. I'm just going to I might as well keep my rayon in there. You could switch back to a different thread if you wanted, but I'm going to keep that in there. Here's what I recommend, because we're going to see this right on the edge. Start here at this kind of crease, I guess I'd call it. Start here, back up to the edge, come down, come off, go reverse, and cut your stitch right in there. What that does is, you know how when you cut your threads, really on anything, you see that just that little bit of the end of that keeps that here and not on the edge where we're clearly seeing that. So let's go sew that together right now. I want you to see that. Well, I'll back up. And I'll cut my thread there. Okay, so now here's what this looks like. You know, you don't really need to iron that away. That line, as I said, you know, it's covered up with a thread and going to be kind of curled under. Now, here's what I recommend. The easiest way to make this is to just add the next sandwich to this side. And again, the line's going to be on the right, and you're going to back sides together, I would say, and just keep adding on instead of doing two and then joining like we do in quilting. And then just in the very end, you'll link them together. So it's a little bit, I don't recommend, you know, kind of doing two and then adding in, but we wanted to show you what this would look like so that you could see how they attach. Sometimes it's easier to see something partially sewn together. So I have my drawn line here. So let's just go right side together. Let's make sure we've got everything oriented. One thing I wanted to point out that's easy to get kind of disoriented, I guess I would say, and that's really kind of on her template, is notice there's the inner point. I should have pointed this out earlier. There's the inner point and then the outer point. So again, if you kind of mark them all at the same time, you're not going to get messed up with that. It's if you kind of only mark some and then go back, it might get a little bit a little confusing. So let's go with the kind of back sides together. And again, well, I'm just going to do the same exact technique. I'm just going to clip here, and let me just move these over here so I'm not reaching over myself the whole time. Just like before, start here, back stitch, come off and back stitch, and then that'll attach here. And then over on this side, again, we'll go with the back sides together. And I'm just going to sew those. So when I come back, What I want to show you with next is how to close those. I want to give you a couple options, and let me go just sew this together and I'll be right back. So we have all of our wreath sewn together, and of course now this portion. This one can be challenging. I have to tell you, yesterday when I tried to sew those, because you're trying not to overlap them. They're trying to just meet. I'm going to give you a couple techniques on that, both on the machine as well as by hand. You know what? At the end of the day, when we're struggling with the machine, go back to what we know. We can just do that by hand. So let me just show you the method with needle and thread first, and then we'll try it on the machine. Maybe you could even try that on some scrap fabric and decide what you want to do. I just have a red thread here. You could be using embroidery floss, you could be using a rayon, whatever you want to do. I've just threaded a Richard hemming needle. And let's look at it. We're going to zoom in on some of these points here. These were done on the machine, and you can see that the goal here, this is too thick to overlap. Our goal is to bring this together. Now, if we were going to do this on a machine, the simplest way, don't be afraid to push this thing around, is you're going to come into the machine and you're just trying to do, like, you almost set your stitch length on 0 and a zigzag. So you're just adding a lot of density of thread and then trying to connect it that way. I will demonstrate that, but sometimes you get a little bit of a peak like this one here. This one, we did a better job of getting them adjacent and not kind of peaking or overlapping. But let's say you're like, I don't really like that. I like handwork, or I'm not comfortable with that, or maybe I'm sewing on a featherweight. I don't have that stitch. I have one of those at home too, by the way. So let's just pop in a needle here, and I've looped this around. So I basically took a long strand of, or whatever you call it, length of thread, brought both ends up. So I have a loop at the bottom. That's what's allowing me to catch that right there. So I don't have a knot. Now I'm just going to come down and doing this action, right, where they're just kind of abeam each other. They're just meeting here like this. I think if you're looking for the most polished results, this is the way to do it. No question, because you have more control. You're working it by hand. The other thing that's kind of fun is, let's say that you have some beads that are maybe faceted, they're beautiful, and you want to be able to incorporate a bead right here. They talk about this embellishing. Just let your imagination run and do some really beautiful accents. Maybe you have some mother of pearl buttons you want to put in here. But this is a surefire way to go ahead and do that. And you're going to obviously do that 4, 5, maybe even 6 times. This is something I would never want to wash. I don't know how this would come out. Now, in the end, I'm just going to catch that. Did you see that? Let me do it one more time. And I might even try to catch that and close it off on the underside, because you can still get in here just like that. Hopefully you can see that. Once, let's do one more time. So we're just closing that off, finishing that off on the underside, just like that. And you'll want to trim that pretty close. That's why I want you to tie at least 2 knots, maybe more. And that's what that's going to look like. And it's really smooth and sure. Now, if you don't like handwork, let's go to the machine. More challenging, for sure, but possibly faster if you can master the technique. So let's go to our machine now. We're going to really reduce our stitch length to just about nothing and get real wide. And I'm going to recommend here, you really want to probably practice this on something and see if that's the density. Let's practice this. I'm going to get maybe a scrap piece of fabric I have here on set. I just have a piece of fabric. And let's just practice that. Let's see what we're going to get. Our goal is to really just not travel. Now I think, looking at that, that's probably not wide enough. That's why I always recommend grab a scrap piece of fabric. I'm going to go just a little bit wider on that. Maybe a 4, 4.5. Practice that. Now, so here's the technique. We know that these two are what needs to be gathered. There's no way to do this, approaching this or taking this plate off. It has to be where I'm pressing this out of the way and I'm coming in at an angle. I'm going to try to keep this flat so that the camera can see what I'm doing. And I'm trying to just get that edge. Let's see how we do. Several stitches. So we're going to stay close. I want you to see this real quick. Let me clip my thread. If you do this technique on your machine, when you open this up, sometimes you can kind of shimmy this. Do you see how I just did that? How I kind of move the stitches almost so that if the fabric was slightly stacking on top of itself, you can kind of do a little shimmy and now they're adjacent to each other. So the one I did by hand, the one I did by machine, I really like the one I did by hand. Plus, you know what else? I could add a bead or some detail here, a button, if I'm doing that by hand. So you'll just go ahead and continue kind of making your flutes, so to speak, until they're all complete. So as you can see, this is a great project done in just a couple hours. You don't need to be an accomplished maker or quilter to do that. And as you can see, it can be displayed here hanging beautifully on a ribbon or on a table, maybe with a candle right in the middle. What a fun project. So, hey, if you're looking for a gift-giving idea, how wonderful to make this as a gift this Christmas, or again, sometime throughout the year, whatever month that might be, for a housewarming gift. Thank you again to Christine Poor for allowing us to bring you this tutorial today. Be sure to subscribe. You don't want to miss out on everything that's coming up here at Shabby. I'll see you soon on another video.